Hi, everyone. Today is another episode on our YouTube channel. Today we have a very special guest hailing from Dallas, Texas. How's it going, Rohan?
Hey. First off, just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on the podcast. This is my first podcast I've ever filmed for someone else. And that being said, I'm actually going to be launching my own podcast potentially next week, actually, with Iman Safdari or Cardman, as some of y'all may know. Super excited for that too. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, Raymond.
Yeah, awesome to always hear new podcasts, new voices come to the hobby. I think that it's always cool to kind of see things from like multiple perspectives. I think podcasts and especially when two people who have never talked before get to kind of talk about each other. It's definitely a good way to get like different combinations of opinions. So glad to have you on, Rohan. For those who don't know you, Rohan, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So for me, I originally participated in the hobby from the years 2011 to 2016. Got taken out of the hobby originally, mainly because I kind of got scammed too much, as most middle schoolers do when they're on Instagram. And that took me out. Over the next 2 or 3 years, I sold off a lot of my cards in order to buy sneakers and a couple of other things. But then pandemic rolled around. I was working doing Uber Eats, and then was actually dropping off an order at the Dallas show, and then stopped by, saw how much money had like flown into the hobby, and instantly was regretting off the cards that I'd sold off, but also was kind of thinking, okay, I really gotta dive back into this. And then fast forward to 2 years later, got a job at the show, quit the job, and then started doing this full time. And yeah, now I'm full-time card flipper and investor.
Lots of questions. I actually didn't know that about you, like how you like got back into cars through Uber Eats order. That's that's very, very interesting. What was the hobby like in 2011? Always
2011?
Yeah.
Well, for starters, I was in like 5th or 6th grade, so don't know if I can get the best description.
Playing cards on the playground.
So, yeah.
What was it like?
There were like 3 kids that I knew in my school that actually collected. One of them was one of my best friends through my basketball team. And then one of them was another good friend of mine. We just didn't have a lot in common, but generally trade with those guys pretty often. Our grail card at the time was always a Jordan auto. That was what we placed on top of everything. And we also put, just because we were kids, didn't care as much about the values, didn't really know how to gauge values as much. We were putting a lot more value into just having a simple base card of a star player. And so oftentimes there were trades that I maybe shouldn't have made because, I was getting a base card of a Troy Tulowitzki or a Mike Trout base card or something like that. Not a 2011 base card though of Trout.
Not a 2011 base card, unfortunately.
Yeah.
How was did you go to shows back then in 2011 when you were a kid, or was it just mainly? Oh, okay.
Yeah, there were not a lot of shows like I'm doing now, but there were like a couple of small ones locally that I would go to. A lot of the hobby veterans are familiar with Rich Klein. Used to work for Beckett. Ran a really, really nice small show in the Dallas area where it was $1 to go in. You had these awesome goodie bags for the kids where you were guaranteed 2 Beckett slabs and then a bunch of other goodies that you would often see distributed at the National. And I went in, and that was going to his shows is probably one of the best things I ever did for myself as a kid when it comes to like engaging in the hobby, because I remember that very first show that I went to when I was in 7th grade. First off, got the goodie bag, and then they had these little raffle tickets, and I won what was a pretty big card at the time, an Eddie Lacy, Giovanni Bernard dual patch auto. And it was crazy to me because that was the biggest card of my collection and actually won that at a show. And then ever since then, I went to a couple more shows after that. And yeah, it was by far my favorite part of the hobby growing up.
What was the biggest thing you learned at these shows when you went as a 5th or 6th grader?
Well, in hindsight, I actually probably learned a little bit better, but I mean, a lot of times these dealers were buying cards at like 30% comps back then. It was crazy.
Wow. Even back then, I guess.
Even back then, like it was, and I mean, you're a kid, you don't realize exactly what's going on, but I sold a Jordan rookie for $20, not the main one, the sticker rookie for $20 to a dealer once. Let's see. I then bought a $50 Des Bryant jersey card off of the same dealer later, but that kind of thing was common back then. Comps were not a very important thing. It was kind of who was the better negotiator, and those people would set the bar. And you still actually do see that in a couple of the other industries, other collectibles industries, such as the watch or the jewelry industry, which is still pretty cool.
Oh, I certainly did not know that. So you go to a lot of shows. I think what I like about your presence in the hobby is that you go to almost every Dallas show. You fly around. You do a lot of live deals. How has that changed nowadays versus like back when you first got into the hobby?
First, like middle school, or
yeah, like in 2011 you said negotiation was a much bigger factor.
Yes.
Prices were not so much. Like, how has that changed now that we're in 2022?
So for starters, I want to say that everything back then, my knowledge as a whole of the hobby was very blurry. Not to mention memory is going to be a little bit fuzzy. Yep. But I will say right now, I think in a lot of cases, unless you're dealing with the rare, ultra high-end market, comps are kind of going to be everything. I mean, and that's not to say that it wasn't back then, or that comps are absolutely everything now. But like, for example, a Luka base PSA 10, if that were around back then there would be a lot more involved in the way of negotiation than there would be comps. While today at a show, comps is all anyone's going to be thinking when they see a Luka base PSA 10, a LeBron Chrome PSA 9, Jordan PSA 8. You get the gist. However, on the other hand, when you're talking about these rare collector cards, everything goes down to that core element of supply versus demand. And whether one sold for 20K on Golden a week ago or sold for 15 on Golden a week ago does not matter when a vendor has the one card available in the entire country priced at 25K.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree with that. It definitely depends on the card that's in question, right? Like, also depends on like how badly the other person wants it. It's like sometimes I think what I like about in-person shows is you can kind of tell or like read how badly the other person wants it. Whereas if I'm messaging you Rohan on Facebook, it's very difficult to kind of gauge that, which kind of makes the trade like a lot more objective, like more of a science than an art. Whereas, if you're in person, things from body language to tone to who sends the first offer to what types of payment methods are used, right? Like all of these factors factor into the ultimate decision of whether or not the deal will be made and who will be favored on the deal. So as a dealer yourself, I see you post a lot on Facebook and all the Facebook groups with all the cards that you have. For those you don't know, just keep an eye out next time for the funny captions that he that are on the post. You see strange caption, that'll be Rohan's. But what's kind of the split between what you do in person versus online on Facebook or other avenues?
That's a good question. I will say, for stars, I'm a lot more likely to trade in person unless I'm trading with someone that I know. That being said, the program that you're launching could really, really go a good way in changing that, because that takes care of the whole protection aspect of trading. So, when it comes to larger, higher end cards, that can really come in hand. As far as my strategy in general goes, I definitely buy a lot more at shows than I do online. And I sell a lot more online because I found that, that makes the job easiest for me. Selling is more of a numbers game, and you're going to get better exposure through Facebook, Instagram, eBay, MySlabs, etc., than you would, at a show where you just have a room full of buyers, right? And at the same time, I can play that to my advantage. And if I'm trying to do a bulk buy, I can tell a dealer that I can come across as one of the better buyers in the room because there simply aren't enough buyers in the room to compete with me.
I see. So say someone has a very big lot of cards, and you go up to the table and he agrees to do it at 70% comps. How do you go about negotiating that deal typically? Will you comp out every single card, or you kind of approximate okay, Zion RPAs are around 2K, they're on card, they're about 3K. How would you kind of think about that process in your head?
Most of the time, if it's not a card that I see as an investment grade card, then I'd be buying it in a large collection between anywhere from 70 to 80% in just order to hot potato it and then sell it off to someone who does think it's a good investment or wants to add that piece to their collection. And so if I can afford to hold a card, and if I'm going to buy one and my estimate is wrong, then I don't want to already be in the dirt. So I comp out every single card. I'll tell the dealer, look, this is what I say comps out at. I have them make sure that we're right on the comps too, because if we're not right on the comps, then we're going to be off on the wrong page the whole time. And I don't want to create some negative resentment between me and the dealer because they think I'm lowballing them at 40% instead of 70%, right? And so I make sure we're on the same page with the comps, and then I tell them, look, this is comping at 11. I'll pay you 8. Let's get this done. And most of the time, that's worked really well for me.
Have you found that people are less willing, like, have you found the straightforward approach to be helpful?
I'd say, so I plan on being in this hobby long-term. And if I want to do deals with the same people and over again, which at this point, you know, most of my inventory that I'm getting is off of people I've dealt with before. Very rarely these days is it off of someone else different. And I feel like a large part of that is because I try to make it my goal to be as transparent as possible with my transactions. And it makes things easier on my end either. I don't have to use any sort of mental gymnastics to get a deal done. The seller knows exactly what they're getting into. And if they're happy with the deal, then they have a future bulk buyer as soon as next week or whenever they re-up and I re-up on cash. I'm big on just creating these long-term relationships. And I think that makes both my life and everyone else's a lot easier.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, like sometimes I have people, even on my side, right? Like I have people who like message me for no other reason other than like we've dealt before, right? And they have a nice card they want to sell and they trust me. And, you know, I'd imagine like it's probably the same for you. The reason I asked that question, so I definitely appreciate like the transparency and like, you know, just being getting straight to the point. The reason I asked is because like I was negotiating with someone on Instagram the other day and he sent a bunch of cards and I was like, okay, like what are your values on each? And, you know, he said something like, oh, you know, let's talk generalities. Let's not talk specific values because I've tend to notice in my experience in the hobby that, you know, if we talk about specific values that kind of like stalls a lot of discussion. It kills a lot of deals before they even happen. And I've never thought about it that way. I thought it was like very, very interesting, right? Like kind of like, you know, there's kind of like two schools of thought, right? Like first you have like a scientific approach. You value every single card. The second is more of like, you know, you go into the deal with optimism, you know, try to work something out. Don't try to start with like agreements rather than like disagreements, like on the same page. And I think you kind of do that by like having like generalities rather than like specific values. So that's kind of what got me thinking, which is why I like asked that question. So
I think a huge part there is also when you're over the internet, it's very hard to tell tone. And I will even admit, like from experience, you know, in those kind of scenarios, if someone brings me a big lot to buy out, and you know, I always tell them first off, one of the very first things I tell them is, do you have room to leave on the table? I'm looking for a 15 to 20% margin on this stuff. And I tell them that's not necessarily based off of comps. That's just based on what I can buy for and what I think I can sell for. And if they tell me no right away, I'm not your guy. I say, okay, cool. Thank you for your time. If they tell me yes, I'll look at their inventory. And if they're significantly above comps, then of course that's where the conversation would stall. Now, if they're not, then that goes into, you know, my next thing of, you know, just making sure that we're on the right values. And as long as you got the right values, you're good to go. So that's why I always make that like my next step.
Do you judge people based on, not like judge people, that's probably not the right word. Do you decide whether or not to pursue a deal based on who's offering it to you?
Depends. So can you give me a scenario?
Yes. So say for example, you know, someone you've dealt with at a show before you know that he has sky high prices, right? His cards are usually priced at 130% comps, and you know he's like a tough negotiator. Will you still try to like get that card for if he offers it to you, or even like other cards, given that you know like his prices are generally pretty high, or would you just kind of like decline overall because you know that you know prices might not be in the same ballpark? I'm always curious. Like I have kind of like my methodology, but curious what other people how other people approach it.
I think everyone kind of like keeps a sense of judgment for the people that they deal with. I think that's something that, you know, as human beings, we can't really avoid that. But I will also say that, you know, some deals I've done with someone, I thought they were sky high on a card, and then the next deal, and then of course we didn't get a deal done that first time, but then the next deal, you know, it goes extremely smoothly. And there's been several incidences of this whether it be like lower end or ultra high end. And I think, one of my best examples would be, we were talking about a Giannis Immaculate RPA the other day. When I traded that card off, the guy that I traded it to, he was, when in our past interactions, he was really high on a lot of his cards. But when we did a deal with that Giannis RPA, it worked out absolutely perfectly. And if I had just written that guy off, then I wouldn't have been able to move that card. Wouldn't have been able to move into that Trout autograph that I really liked. And that really goes to show, I guess, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
Don't let a first impression be everything. That's
exactly. I think, like being patient, kind of like giving everyone a chance, looking at, not being so quick to judge. Right.
Yeah.
I think personally, like I found myself like pretty quick to judge. I do think there's reason for that though, right? Like, if people come to you with like so many deals, you do need a way to like quickly easily distinguish like the ones that have potential versus the ones that don't have potential.
Yes.
Right.
There's people that are going to be like double comps and everything. It's like, yeah, we're probably not.
Yeah. But, do you bother when that happens? Like, do you try?
Do I try when they're double comps on everything?
Or like,
because usually I find that when people say that they're double comps on everything, they'll say one of two things. They'll say either that they're really down bad and that they bought it at all-time highs, and that's as simple as me saying, okay, I either think that these cards are going to continue going up, or the more common, which is best of luck. I personally do not see these cards going up due to market trends, and this is usually because it'll be a bunch of like base stuff, right? I'll do something like that. Let me know if you do reconsider, and then usually they'll come by around within like a week or two, and we end up getting a deal done. But on the other hand, if the card's been on a downward slope and they tell me it's only going up, then I'll be like, then why are you selling it? And then that'll be it.
Yeah, I've never thought of that response before. But I can't even count the number of times where someone's like, oh yeah, like this card is only going up. There's kind of like, it's kind of the typical default response that people have nowadays when you ask them like why their cards are priced the way they are.
I've been throwing Facebook groups just to troll recently. Just throw a Herbert Day 10 and 5K, and whenever anyone argues with me, I'll just say it's only going up in the
It's only going up. It's a rocket. It's a rocket in card form. Okay. What's like the most shocking thing you've learned about people or human nature through dealing in cards? Like, what's something that you think is like not shocking, but like initially you didn't believe to be true, but after dealing with people, after dealing, as with cards, you're like, oh, like I'm very surprised that my initial conception was wrong.
I'd say a couple of things. One, approach anxiety does nothing but hurt you. I mean, you're only hurting yourself if you're not even going to go up to the dealer and have the confidence to show them your card and get the sale off, right? If you go up to them in a timid way, then what's going to make them think that you're confident in the values that you're showing them? Another thing is, it's a numbers game. If that guy says no, then the guy 3 people down the line might say yes. And actually, Roth Cards, I don't know if you know him, but he went a very long way in teaching me this, just because I saw some of his YouTube clips. When I was starting off early on, I got ripped off in a couple of big cards, and I still made money, but I could have made a lot more money. But because I'd been lowballed by a couple of dealers early on, I had started to get a little bit desperate on moving that card.
Yep.
And one of the things that I took from his videos early on was him kind of saying, like, when you have a big card and you believe in that player, that buyer's going to come by eventually, or that perfect trade partner is going to come by eventually. It's all just a numbers game. And ever since I saw that, I started doing a lot better on my bigger cards. I just had to buy a player that I believed in long term. So I'd say if there's one thing that I would say more than anything, speak with your chest and understand that this is a numbers game.
Yeah, I think to add on that, I think what people don't do enough at shows, and one thing I tried at my first national that I went to in, I believe it was 2018, was just stopping people who are walking around with cases. It's kind of a weird thing to do. No, people don't really do that. But people are very open to share their cards, show, even just like talk, right? Like, I randomly, I stopped like Action Jacks, Chris Jackson. I didn't even know who he was back then. And like, like Fry sports cards. And like we met a few years ago just because I stopped them. And you can always get, a few really cool deals. I think a lot of people, they have like kind of a negative impression of dealing with dealers at shows because they have the impression of like, oh, you guys are not on like equal footing. Um, but if you stop someone who's like, hobbyist at a show, they'll be a lot more open to just, sit down, open some cards together. So I definitely agree with that. Just like do things that like other people aren't willing to do, right? And then you'll get results that other people won't be able to get.
And I think you're right. The best warm-up place for, like working on this approach anxiety at shows is the national, because at these other shows, when you go to them, every single person that's walking through is at any given moment is almost always talking to another dealer. While at the national, you just have people walking freely up these hallways like the entire show. And walking up to every single person at the national, I was able to buy Jordan rookies at significantly below comps just over and over again at that show. And I'm pretty sure just going to that show, buying and selling at the show, and then selling my inventory afterwards, I'm pretty sure I increased my collection's value by like 40 or 50% when it was all said and done, just by doing, like you're saying, walking up to people, walking up the hallways.
Yeah, I think someone should teach a class on that. I think I think that's very, very underrated. I think people should definitely do that more. Because like also like at a show, you kind of like see the same people, like the same dealers every single time, right? It's going to be the same group of people, just like in Dallas, in like Florida, in like New York, right? It's the same people. But at shows, the people walking around have different cards because it's more like a local. So you get more variety and like, you don't see the same stuff. So you have a much better chance of like working something out. Yeah, I don't know if you like remember, but like the first time we met, like I was like walking around, you offered me like it was a Patrick Mahomes optic PSA 10, and it's just out of nowhere. And I think you like sold it, like you came back and you sold it like 5 minutes later. So it definitely helps. Just like, it's really just a numbers game, which I think is something else, just like in life, right? Like you kind of need to, first time you try something, you're gonna get burned. Second time you're gonna get burned. Third try you're gonna get burned, right? But you'll get a little better, and then eventually, you succeed at it, right? So, yeah, glad that other people do that and like kind of
pretty badly, like early on in the hobby. I mean, like for me, it came in the form of scamming or getting ripped off by dealers. I'm sure. Do you have any stories of getting burned early on in the hobby?
I got burned recently, actually. So not even, not even, a long time ago. I had, this was last summer. I bought a bunch of Kobe cards, met some guy in New York at Starbucks. We did the deal. Good guy. We like sat, talked for 30 minutes. He had been collecting for a long time. The origins of the card were, I was a little bit sketched out at first because I'd never seen this guy around before. He had like one feedback, but I met him up. Nice guy. From questions I was asking him, he had been in the hobby for a long time. Messages me 3 months later. He's like, "Oh, I have this Jordan rookie, which I'll sell to you at 75% comps. Can you pay friends and family?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure. Good price. It's Jordan rookie. Always down to pick more of those up. Pay him friends and family." And he just disappears. Like, haven't heard from him since. And I figured, since I'd met him before, and we talked for such a long time that you can kind of tell when like someone's truthful or not. Like I did a good impression of him when we had met. So I sent the money, never got the card, and I don't know. Like, do you if someone scams you, like, do you kind of like go and like try to get the money back? Like, what do you kind of like what are some things that you try to like get the money back?
Well, of course to try to get the money back. Fortunately enough, I haven't been scammed many times. I think in total, since re-entering the hobby, I've been scammed 2.5 times, I would say. First time, I was telling you a little bit about it earlier. Dude sent me an empty box. It was a $400 card. If I'm being honest, I didn't care too much about the whole thing because I'd already profited off of, we did a trade plus cash deal. Yeah. He sent me an empty box and he sent me some cash. I'd already profited off the card, so I didn't care too much about the whole thing. But I was still kind of pissed off, right? But what pissed me off the most about that whole thing was that in order to make himself look better, before I could say anything publicly, he tried to post me as a scammer, and that made a couple of guys, say some shit in the comments, and that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But of course, his post got taken down. But a lie gets halfway around the world before truth gets out of bed. So that really rubbed me the wrong way. Second time, I kind of just badgered the guy to get my money back, and he sent me almost all of my money back today. But like me, a bunch of other guys got onto him, and I think that was part of it. He kind of just got scared. Last time, got scammed, and this is actually something that I'm still dealing with today. Don't want to get too much into detail with that, but same thing. Just kind of the best thing that you can do is bug the guy as much as you can. Try and get some of the money back, if any, and then if it's a large enough amount, get a lawyer. Number one thing you need to do.
That's the story about the person like trying to beat you to the punch. I'm gonna like post that before you get the chance to is interesting. I feel like from my personally, like I don't think I put enough effort into like chasing these guys down as I should. Granted, I've only gotten scammed once, but I kind of like same mentality. Like we had done a deal before. I had recouped some of the money that I got scammed for. So as long as I kind of learn my lesson, I just be more careful next time. I feel like most of the scams nowadays are like scams. They're more like gray area things. It's like the other day I saw like someone had shipped someone a 30K baseball card. I'm pretty sure you saw that, right? And like it wasn't insured, but it got lost, and then there was like a lot of back and forth. I think it's just more of like that gray area stuff. It wasn't like, oh, an empty box, never sent the cash, never sent the cards, right? It's more like the gray area stuff. But I had a very like clear opinion like on that, like what had happened. Like someone paid a card, sent wire, never got the card. Yeah, I think the seller should be liable.
There's no way that the buyer should not be getting some form of compensation. And I think what rubbed me wrong the most about that situation was, rather than address the issue, the fact that if you're shipping $30,000 cards, you need to have your own private insurance plan, which can be done through either any of the vaulting companies such as PwCC, or through your own insurance through Collect Insure. You need to have one of those three if you're shipping cards that expensive. And rather than address that issue, he told the buyer that he accused the buyer of flying to Vegas, infiltrating the USPS headquarters, paying off a guy and stealing the packages.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, sorry, continue.
I don't want to, go too much into that. But like at the end of the day, if you're shipping a large card, get your insurance. Like, don't worry about anything else. Just get the insurance so that way situations like this don't happen.
Actually, wasn't aware you could buy insurance through PwCC or how does that work? Are those like
you can't buy it through them, but if you have cards stored with them,
okay,
are insured.
Yeah, my experience of them has been really good. Like, I shipped I traded a $13,000 Jordan card to Sports Card Therapist. It got lost, and all it paid me out on the card that was lost very quickly. Nice. So. But yeah, I personally use Collect Insure. I think they've also been really, really, really good. Not sponsored, by the way, but they've been really, really good in terms of like making sure that the card gets from point A to point B clearly. But what I was trying to get at on that the lost card was I'm not trying to like side with one person or the other, but one thing I noticed from the comments was that there were people on both sides of the argument, which was very, very surprising to me. Right, like. You're never going to please everybody in this hobby. There's always going to be someone for you. There's always going to be people against you, and they'll always have their own reasons, right? So just kind of believe in like, what you think is right. And like, that's like one thing I feel like, the biggest thing that I've learned, right? Someone's going to always have an opinion. And it'll be for the most, like what you think is the most like insane reason, but their opinion is also valid. And everyone will have something else to say, right? So I like reading these like scammer posts because I feel like just like looking at people's reasoning. But that was kind of like the number one takeaway that I got from reading this. So Rohan, earlier you told me that you were launching a podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So me and Iman or Cardmon on Instagram, we made a podcast just kind of to we got bored one day. We were like, hey, let's make a podcast, share some of our thoughts on things in the hobby, and bring in some people that we think are interesting people with a lot of cool ideas to bring to the table. And we actually have already filmed our first two episodes. First episode with at Basketball Card Paradise, or David Woods, is going to be premiering sometime soon. We're just getting the intro and outros edited right now, and I'm super excited for that.
Oh, I know David, great guy. Drove me to a show in Long Island in New York last summer. But yeah, excited to hear more about those episodes. What's kind of going to be the focus of the podcast? Is it going to be mainly interviews? Going to be like hobby news? What is kind of the initial plan?
Interviews, just so our focus, we're trying to take more of a money-driven focus to the hobby, like talking about how to invest correctly, how to flip correctly, how to negotiate correctly. We want our focus to be on that, but our second guest is actually his name's Scott. He lives in Miami. He's actually a collector first, and so we thought it would be a really cool idea to bring a collector onto a podcast with a bunch of people who are primarily flippers and investors, just to kind of see how the ideas bounce off each other. And that second episode went really, really, really well, and I think people are going to like that one a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely keep all of us posted. There will be a link to Rohan's podcast when the video is uploaded on the bottom of the YouTube video. It's fair. I think a point that you talked about earlier is really interesting to me. How you're going to talk about the money and the flipping aspect. I think that unfortunately there's like kind of this taboo in the hobby when it comes to talking about money, talking about flipping stuff. Like I've had people come to me like, oh, I need this card for my PC. I'm a huge LeBron fan, and then when it gets to them, they'll like immediately list it or like sell it. So I feel like there is this taboo of like talking about money, but I don't think there should be. Like I got to this hobby because I wanted to make some side income, and I just wanted to explore something completely new. But now I love it, right? Like I came for the money, but now I'm here for the cards, right? Like I truly love talking about the design of the cards, the new cards that are released, right? Like the history of the cards, right? Like I've grown to love it, but I did initially come 100% for the money, and like I'm not afraid to admit that, right? And I think that there shouldn't be this taboo in this hobby about I'm just trying to make a living, trying to keep the lights on, and I think it's okay to like not even care about cards, right? And if you're just here like for the business aspect, like I respect that, right? And I think it's great how you guys are doing having a take where it's like, okay, just purely the flipping and the investing side, right? Because people want to hear, because frankly I don't think there's enough of that in the hobby. I think it's a lot of the hobby is like very collector focused, which is great, right? But I think there should be a healthy balance.
Well, so on that same topic, I think that there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. If you're in the hobby just for the money and you don't empathize with those that actually do enjoy it, then this industry is not for you. But if you are in the hobby just for the money, as long as you respect the true collector, then you're good to go. I've gone to shows and I've seen viewers tell people to their face, like, I'm not a collector. I'm just a dealer. I'm just in this for the money. I don't care about this card, and that's why I'll offer you 60% of comps.
Right.
I mean, I'm in this for the money first, but if someone were to approach me with that kind of mindset, then I would be a little bit annoyed, if I'm being honest, because you're not even showing respect to the culture that's making you your living in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. Definitely. Like it's. Yeah, I don't think that type of behavior would like fly in any industry, to be honest, right? Like,
right.
I think, yeah, just like always be respectful. Be socially aware, right? Like just, like kind of like learn how to like read the dealer, read what cards are on the table, read kind of like negotiation tactics. And one thing I love about the hobby is like people are like very, very willing to teach, right? Like I've never like from the the early days when I joined the hobby, like I've never felt the hobby to be like intimidating. Everyone's just been like really like welcome and like very, very open. I'm just teaching like a newbie about stuff, right?
I think that's also a new element though. Back when I was a kid, it was very intimidating, probably partially because I was a kid. But when I jumped back in, literally like first day I got into that room, met a dealer and he was like, "Hey, what's up, man? Yeah, you're just getting into the hobby. These are some really nice packs to rip." And he showed me Chronicles. He was like, "There's a great way to start off your collection, cheap way to get a bunch of rookies." And if I don't have that conversation with him and have a conversation with the next guy on why Prism rookies are better than Chronicles rookies, then I probably would have been out of the hobby in a month. And the welcoming nature of a lot of people to me is what got me where I am today.
Yeah, it's like, and these are people that you remember for the rest of your life, right? Like
Yes.
maybe they're not in the hobby anymore, maybe you don't see them at shows, but you'll remember those experiences, and then you'll try to pay it forward. Like one thing that I always remember is like, at my first national, I messaged someone. I made a post on NBA Hotspot. I was like, I'm here at my first card show. Does anyone want to meet up? And this big collector like Mike Yu, otherwise known as like 0.4 seconds. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'll meet up with you." What?
That guy's stuff is amazing.
Yeah, I almost shat my pants as he like showed me his PSA box.
Wow.
But like sat down for like an hour with me at the tables at PSA, showing me his collections, explaining to me like why he liked this Kobe card over like that Kobe card, and like like types of like NT Currys he had. And like, he didn't have to do that. Like, I didn't know shit. Like, I had nothing to offer him. But the fact that he, did that, I think speaks volumes, about the types of people in this hobby, right?
Yes.
And then he also gave me, a cardboard box to hold my cards as I left, which I still have to this day, because I was holding everything in my pocket, right? And he was like, "Yeah, like what are you doing, Raymond?" But yeah, just like small gestures, right? It doesn't need to be like something fancy. Just knowledge, I think, is the most important asset. But
yeah,
that's something that at least personally, like I will always remember. All right, so we're running close on time. Any other last thoughts you want to give to the viewers?
I guess I would ask you, what's your favorite card in your collection?
I really like last year Kobe cards. I collect the 2019 in-flight set, and I recently got my hands on the gold version. It's his last on-card auto. It says in-flight at the top. I actually didn't believe that Panini had produced gold versions, because for the past 3 years, ever since they're released, not a single one had popped up. Best I had seen was tie-dye, and I'd owned like 4 of those. So I was really surprised when I saw the gold pop up. So I was like, had to have it. I like it because it's such a chilling card. Like,
yeah,
it's like almost. I don't really care about the earlier versions, like their versions from 2015, 2016. But like the last year, for some reason, has always stuck out to me, both the design and like the significance of the card.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite Kobe autos too. Anything from the in-flight signature set.
Anything from the in-flight. I especially like the vertical ones. I think the 2015 one is horizontal, but all the others are vertical. I really like those. And also, they don't smear. The 2019 ones are not very smeared. The other years, it's hard to get a good quality one. I don't know why, but 2019 ones are like pretty high quality. The auto is
another really good Kobe auto, or really just any on-card autograph in general. The flawless, I think it's called the all-time greats one. Where they have those 2 patches on the side, those two trapezoid shaped patches. And
yes,
love that design. Panini built it on that design.
Yeah, I really like that one too. I think if the patch is good on both, that's really awesome. The only thing that that kind of bothers me is like one of them's a napkin and the other one is like a stick patch. I think it just needs to be balanced. Then you kind of have like the perfect card.
I agree there.
Cool. Well, pleasure having you on today, Rohan. You can find Rohan on Facebook. He posts a lot in a lot of the groups. You can also find him on Instagram at Slab Mafia Sports. And I'm excited for the podcast. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Raymond.